Hello, America. Dave Hodges here, host of the Common Sense Show. We are the show that is freeing America one enslaved and hopefully one enslaved mind and soul at a time. We defend God, family, country, and we have a special place for the oppressed. And right now, so I have noticed on many occasions, Americans are oppressed. And they're oppressed to the point where there's a lot of talk right now about third parties. Record numbers of Americans are leaving both the Democratic and the Republican Party and registering as independents. And subsequently, there's a lot of talk about will there be a legitimate, powerful third party? Well, I decided to go ahead and look into this, and I'm going to give you a little bit of historical principles that no one's talking about yet. I think people are going to turn their attention to this, though, and it's interesting too. What people are really objecting to, besides the war and besides Israel's government domination over ours, the military merger that's pending under Section 224 of the National Defense Authorization Act, people are upset about that, and that knowledge base is growing, and the dissent is following that. But you know what people are really mad about? They're mad about the personal intrusions into their lives, whether it's flock cameras or your TV and computer spying on you. And they hear about these lawsuits and they go, this is crazy. And we know we're surveilled all the time, 24/7, and people are sick of it. And this is really a big deal with people. And they fear AI. They're learning about the uh, insatiable thirst for water and electricity demanded by the data centers, particularly in areas that are drought-ridden. Arizona, the Ogallala water aquifer stretching from Texas to South Dakota. You got 8 states in the Southwest that are in big trouble, and they're tired of this because they see this as problems that are going to grow. And they're tired of governments saying one thing at election time and doing another after they're elected. Although I have noticed something in this primary cycle. Tell me if you don't agree with this. Rather than the fake promises that they're known for, and we're not going to have any war, says President Trump. We're going to focus on domestic energy. Yeah, okay. And then it doesn't happen. Right now, what I'm seeing in the campaigning is nothing but mudslinging. Hey, he went out and hired an escort. Saw that ad this morning. Okay, that's interesting. He supported something from the other side, the other political view. Oh, like we're never supposed to cooperate. And it's just total personal attacks. Picks his nose in public. Right? Doesn't close the urinal in the bathroom. I mean, when you name it, I'm hearing ridiculous allegations and to the point where politics is now mudslinging. Well, you know, if voting and political activities made a difference, they probably would outlaw it. But we're going to go ahead and talk about a third party. Can a third party clean up the mess? And then I'll give you my version of the third party, and probably about 30% of you aren't going to like it. Another 30%, you're going to wholeheartedly endorse it. And 40% will think I'm going to think about it. Well, here we go. First of all, we have a sponsor for this show, and this sponsor is responsible, I believe, for saving my life and giving my lifestyle back. The Nanosoma Magic Dicol Starter Pack, 15% off retail, by the way. And you get 3 Nanosoma liquid sprays. And this is what let me erase something that was really, I was told, life-threatening and probably won't go away. RSV with strip lung linings. Boost your immune system. Doesn't cure anything, but the immune system boost is off the charts. Over 30 peer-reviewed studies show this. Then we have the gel you rub on joints, inflammation, arthritis, bone on bone. And for the vast majority of people with consistent application, they're going to have significant relief, if not full remission of the pain. I've got full remission of the pain, knock on wood, but I do. And I couldn't even do a squat prior to taking these products, which I knew nothing about until Scotty Sachs brought them to me. Then there's a skin cream for fine lines and wrinkles. Okay, that's the vanity, but cuts and burns, terrific stuff. Every medicine cabinet should have this, particularly since we're going into supply chain danger time. So make sure that you stock up on this. Go to iwantmyhealthback.com/Dave Hodges. iwantmyhealthback.com/Dave Hodges. Well, let's take a look at the third party scenario. We see them. We see the Green Party, the Libertarian Party. And by the way, I don't agree with all the things the Libertarians say and do, but I admire how they have stuck to their so-called guns all the way through their process, but they have a hard time making inroads. I've got really good friends who are libertarians. My good friend Ernie Hancock was the chairman of the Maricopa County Libertarian Party. And Ernie used to host the Arizona Breakfast Club, which they brought in all kinds of really cool people to speak. And it was a fantastic situation, all brought to you by the libertarians. And well, just put it this way, really good effort, but they couldn't break through the two-party, we're going to lock arms together and block everybody else out. They make it almost impossible to get a third party registered in most states. And they do that on purpose. They don't want competition. And really, we have the uniparty today, and that's nothing new. That's not a novel concept. I mean, it's two sides of the same coin. And, just like we get upset with the Republicans, we vote for the Democrats. We get upset with the Democrats, we vote for the Republicans. And things only continue to get worse. We see the erosion of liberty. The stratification of wealth is absolutely incredible right now. We're seeing the biggest wealth transfer ever, including the Great Depression. Well, let's just talk about this. More billionaires being created than ever before, okay, in America. But it doesn't trickle down because 65% of American families cannot afford a $500 car repair bill. That's called stratification of wealth, and it's not healthy. It's what leads ultimately to civil discourse, civil disobedience, and sometimes civil war. And I mean, this is an international model for this. I said yesterday it's what led to the French Bastille and the way they set up for the C effect. If I say the word Cantillon, you get shadow banned. Okay. I learned that yesterday the hard way. So I'll call it the C effect from now on, where the rich get at the top of the level, the banks, the top corporations, they get the money first. They get enough money to buy the assets, and everybody else, they balance the budget or pay down the debt by causing a gap between what you're paid on CDs, savings accounts, wage earners, and so forth. And then the inflation rate is higher and they inflate away the debt. And this is what's going on right now today. And this is how I believe the Iran war is being used, is to buy down the debt by causing inflation. And we're going right back into it. And you think oil was bad when it hit, what was it, 450? The gasoline at the pump was $4.50. Um, I know the sky is not falling, and my name's not Chicken Little, but I'm telling you, 450 will seem like a gift compared to what could be coming if that Strait of Hormuz stays closed for very long. Now, having said, by the way, we do import about 12% of our oil. And the offset of that is enough to dip into your reserves. When you're fighting a war, you're going to use your oil faster. It's not going to go to the public first. It's going to go to the military industrial complex first. And that will create shortages and the prices will go way up and we'll have gas lines and then we'll have rationing and then we'll have unavailability. And the same thing applies to food and the same thing applies to, well, what do you think it'll be? Medicine, which is why I advertise for Magic Dicol because it's kind of a catch-all. Now, let's talk about, will there be a third party rise up? People have had it. MAGA is going to be split in half by the time we're done with the midterms. Split in half. So what's the deal going to be? Split in half for what? Good question, Dave. Split in half and they're neutered. And the Democrats will take over. In fact, actually, the way things are going, the death of Lindsey Graham is absolutely catastrophic to Donald Trump. Because now we look at the possibility the Senate could be lost. And if the Senate's lost to the Democrats and the House is lost to the Democrats, I don't care if Trump didn't cut his toenails short enough. They're going to impeach him on any grounds that they find, any grounds. And all they need is the vote. It'll be J.D. Vance, and then they'll go after him. I mean, we're going to look at a real tumultuous time if the GOP doesn't maintain power. But people are looking at this and say, I don't want the GOP to maintain power, but I'm afraid of the Democrats because they're just crazy. They've kicked God out of their party. They endorse things that hurt kids. I don't want any part of these guys. And this is what you hear. So people feel like, oh, there's no choice. I'm just giving up. And people retreat into a shell and become a victim of the latest whim of whoever's in power. And this is the bottom line, people. This is the bottom line. You can't escape it. You know, there was a really good movie. I think it was called Shenandoah. Um, and it was Jimmy Stewart, and it was a movie about a farm family, and they thought they were in Virginia in the Shenandoah Valley, and they thought they could sit out the Civil War. They found out you can't, and you can't sit out what's coming against us. And what's coming against us is further wealth stratification. AI, hello, knock on wood. AI, are you hearing me? Replacing all these jobs. They say in 5 years, 90% of the jobs could be gone. I think that's a little high, but if it's just 10% of the jobs, the economy is going to be in chaos. And the wealth distribution, well, you got the idea. And then the C effect kicks in, and the wealthy still get their money, still get their paid. They control the assets, and boom, you are shafted unless you're in that privileged class. So what's the answer? Pick up the pitchforks and let's have a civil war. They're not likely to be very successful. Seriously, just the crowd control techniques they have to suppress dissent would stop that. And then, of course, as Biden once said, you have M16s? You think you want to rebel? We have F-16s. You know, and as disjointed as that statement was, actually, if you could decipher his, speech patterns, which is almost like a foreign language towards the end of his time, he was right. They have the technology to stop any kind of rebellion, and I don't endorse violence unless it's in self-defense. So, will a third party come to power? The answer is probably not. And the best example in recent American history where it had a real chance to succeed was with Ross Perot. And he used to buy these infomercials and come on for his campaign ads and have the billboards, and he'd show the trade deficit with Mexico and how NAFTA was destroying the American economy. And he was right. We lost jobs, workers lost buying power. It was inflationary to the American public. He was absolutely right. NAFTA was a deal for the rich, by the rich, and only benefited the rich in both Mexico and the United States. And he really made hay on that. Now, you go into June before the November election, and you had H.W. Bush and you had Bill Clinton. The numbers were Perot number one, Clinton number two, Bush number three, and it wasn't close. Perot was kicking butt and taking names. People had had enough. And by the way, the problems of the 90s are minuscule compared to what we face today. But people had enough. Now, here's why people were awake and aware. And this is a really critical element for you to consider. In 1992, and this was the election of 92, in 92, you had 155 corporations controlling 95% of the media. When Clinton gets in, he does away that FCC regulation. I think he acted unconstitutionally. It should be challenged, but not going to beat the rich and powerful very often. And so that number was reduced to 6 corporations control 98% of the media. And by the way, I'm glad to hear this is taught in journalism schools. And this is why campaigns are so tightly controlled because of the media influence. You know, people hear a big enough lie often enough, they come to believe it, as the old Nazi saying goes. And it's true. And the corporations that control the media have interests they need government to support, and they're going to support the candidates that'll play ball with them. And they throw all kinds of money at them, give them all kinds of favorable news coverage. And their news interviews, like Meet the Press and all these other shows, are all designed to mold public opinion into the candidates that they want to get elected. Now, they can play some games, and they did with Ross Perot. Because there was 155 media companies, you had a diversity of thought, and the American person wasn't so discouraged they gave up. They were enraged, and many of them were enthusiastically supporting Ross Perot because they thought, finally, we might have a man in the White House who will care about our needs and not the needs of the super elite to the disadvantage of us. So Perot is leading. And then all of a sudden, we wake up one morning to the announcement he's quitting. And I remember thinking, what? What? Hey, we're ahead in that game by 20 points in the fourth quarter. But Mr. Referee, we're going to forfeit. We're going to take our ball and go home now. What? That was crazy. That was absolute insanity. And then we got an excuse from Ross Perot, which, let's put it this way. This kind of excuse I expect to show up in the Tyler Robinson trial. Here's what he said. My daughter was going to have a wedding, and there were threats against her and the wedding party, and just for the good of my family, I have to quit the election. That was the worst flipping excuse I ever heard in my life to quit a presidential election. And if you think that I'm under exaggerating why he quit, go and look it up. This is crazy. What ended up happening clearly is he was getting threats from the big boy. He was a businessman. He was successful. And I'm sure they were threatening his empire. That's the only thing that makes any sense. Daughter's wedding, okay, hire 1,000 security guards. Ross Perot was rich enough to do that. And then announce it. Hey, we're getting these threats. That would have brought the sympathy vote in, and his numbers would have grown. And no, that's not what happened. He quits. And then I believe it was late August, early September. He finally gets a backbone again, gets mad, and says, I'm coming back in. Too late. His numbers had tanked in his absence. He couldn't get it back. He didn't win any states. He did get 20 million votes. That's pretty interesting, but not enough to carry any state. 20 million votes on a failed campaign. That's pretty amazing. It shows you how upset America was at this time. And right now, I think we're a combination of upset and giving up. And I think you probably see a lot of this. And I expect the voter numbers in these primaries that are upcoming to just tank. I think the voter turnout's going to be low because people are discouraged. I mean, they're disillusioned by Trump's failed campaign promises. And sorry, you're saying, oh, Dave, you're not MAGA anymore. You don't support Trump. That's not even the issue. Did he make certain campaign promises that he had control over? And is he following up what he said he would do for the American people? No, he made the U.S. government a captured entity of a foreign nation. That's what he's done. And this is why people are mad. And I'm not saying anything revolutionary because this is what the majority of the voters say. Ask the young people what they think. They voted for Trump, and I don't think he could get 10% of their vote today because of this. Now, let's get into one more thing that could happen. Had Ross Perot stayed in the race, he may have had a chance. But if Ross Perot were 2026 and not 1992, no way. Too many weird things happen in elections today that did not happen in 1992. You had to really worry about the numbers. Let me give you an example, okay? Here's an undisputed fact reported through all kinds of media. When you looked at Spencer Pratt, right, was he going to qualify to be in the finals for the LA mayor race? Well, he was leading significantly. And then at the midnight hour after election day, 20,000 ballots come in. Oh, gee, we just found these, and here they are, 20,000 ballots. And every one of them was for his opponent. Wait a minute. They're not even hiding it. It is statistically impossible improbable. You'd have to be an absolute naive person to believe this story, but it happened, and this is validated. I don't like to report things like this because I want young people to feel that they should campaign, speak their opinion, and express themselves to their vote. But there were games played in LA. Oh, you don't think so? Well, Trump is actually having the DOJ look into this. But where he's limited because the way the Constitution is set up, states control elections. And if you can't go back and unravel the chain of custody of 20,000 votes, you're not going to be able to prove anything. And it's not what you think or what you know, it's what you can prove. And the courts have also shown even if you can prove improper behavior, improper procedures, they'll say to a candidate, you don't have standing, which is what happened to Trump in 2020. When you run for office, how do you not have standing in your own election to make sure it's fair? And so the courts never considered the issues. When you hear the things that say his allegations have been totally disproven, that is not true. No, they told him he didn't have standing to bring a lawsuit. It had nothing to do with the merits of his case. And the same with Spencer Pratt. Now, that Ross Perot did not face that in 1992. So the bully card had to be played against him. And then he grew a spine and said, I'm going to get back in. Had he stayed in and fought, could have sequestered the wedding party until the election was over. I mean, there were a number of options he had. He sabotaged his own campaign, and I wonder if a deal wasn't made too. Seriously, because it's really odd to me. He came back into the race knowing he could not win at that point. But what he did do was split the Republican vote, allowing Bill Clinton to win. Isn't that interesting? Now, let's talk about today. That's your history of the only legitimate third party candidate. I didn't say good candidate, I said legitimate with a chance to win was Ross Perot. Today, you won't get the time of day in the media. 6 corporations versus 155. Okay? All kinds of interesting practices in elections that didn't exist in 1992, at least alleged. A third party candidate has no chance. But what you can do is build a third party loose coalition that's not tied to we're headquartered in Denver, Colorado. Okay. Nothing like that. Okay. We're going to have a convention and nominate candidates. Nothing like that. That is doomed to failure. Just ask the libertarians. Sorry, libertarians, I love you, but you can't win an election on a major level. And then you look at the Green Party, the same exact thing. It doesn't matter what the party is. If you're not Republican and if you're not Democrat, okay, chances of you winning are slim and none, and slim has already left town. So what can the people do? Well, right now with people leaving both parties, go, man, they're both full of crap. I just give up. Well, you could actually start to ignite people on sub-political causes. That's a term you probably have not heard before. Subpolitical means that we're going to enact joint actions from the public, but it's not part of the political process, has nothing to do with campaigning or voting. And you think, what could you do? Are you talking violence? No. Now, as I said yesterday, if this diversification of wealth gets really bad and people can't feed their families, there's going to be trouble. And Roosevelt faced this. Franklin Roosevelt did during the Great Depression. And what he did make work projects like the CCC and the PWA and all those groups. He put people to work at very low wages, very hard work, built the Hoover Dam, those kinds of things, built parks and stadiums and so forth. And the government started to go into debt at that point, by the way. But he did prevent the people from rising up. And had he not done that, we probably would have had major civil disobedience, if not a revolution. And so I credit FDR, the socialist that he was, I credit him with holding the republic together during very tough times. Now, let's go to today. With all the people leaving the independent media, I don't know that there'll be time to build a collective consciousness among people who have tuned out the media, which they should, and people who have walked away from the two political parties. That's an individual choice. I don't know that that's happened. If there's enough time to build a consensus before November. But the timing of the election doesn't matter because the solution that I think could be forthcoming is not political, it's social and economic. And I don't think you have to break any laws. There eventually will be a tax revolt in this country if we don't turn this around. Eventually. It's how housing continues to escalate and wages don't keep up. And then your biggest bill will be your property tax bill more than your mortgage, and people lose their homes. That's when the pitchforks come out. When you can't put food on the table, that's when the pitchforks come out. And then they're going to try to tell you, well, we're going to give you universal basic income. No, 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 no. Don't believe that's not going to happen. People aren't going to pay you to do nothing. They might do it one time just to get you to shut up and go away. But then when that's over, it's business as usual. So don't even think about going down that avenue. Oh, they'll take care of us, just like they are now. Now, what's the answer? Consumer shutdown. Sit down on a sheet of paper with a sheet of paper and look at your expenditures. Review the last 3 months. What do you need to survive? Well, okay, you got to pay your water bill, you got to pay your utility bill, right? Especially if you're in a harsh climate, winter, summer. For us, it's summer in Arizona. For people in New England, it's winter. Okay, and you need water. You got to pay your mortgage. You got to pay your property tax. You got to pay your income tax based on the job, hopefully, you still have. Okay, these are essentials. You got to buy food. Do you have choices when it comes to food? Yeah, you know what I've discovered when I've done keto diet? If you're smart about it, you actually save money. Now you can get into organic and pay an arm and a leg, but if you are intelligent and do some comparison shopping, when I did keto, we actually saved money on my portion of the diet. So you can be smart about your food bill. Okay. Your old clunker that's out there, well, not clunker, maybe it's 5 years old. Don't even think about buying a new car. They're 30% higher than they were during COVID. And now they're trying to fix these cars so you can't repair them. And you go to a dealer in a dealer service and you're paying 2 to 4 times more than you would in your neighborhood garage because they're making it impossible to repair. And they're loading your system with a bunch of computers that interact with each other. A failure in one system leads to a failure in all systems. This is a big problem with the 2026s and 2027s. Don't buy a new car. People just say, we're not going to do it. And this is part of the collective conscious. Right now, fix your old car. You say, oh, now what's happening is people that own the car industries are extremely wealthy. They have a lot of power. They're going to be screaming at the government for a solution. I don't think there is one. They're trying to ban classic cars in some states. So you know that this isn't going to happen though. It violates the Fifth Amendment property rights, and they're going to try to make up some kind of air pollution deal and so forth. That's not going to work. Okay. But yet they're showing you that they know you, the consumer, are going to revolt. And so they're trying to get state legislatures to ban cars over 20, 30 years old. And that's happening in a lot of states right now. Last time I counted, I think it's eight or nine states. And that's going to grow, but it's going to fail. So don't buy new cars. Okay. Then divide your budget into, okay, your needs, which I just went through in part, and then what's nice to have, your wants. And the problem with Americans today and their budgets is they often can't differentiate between a need and a want. A need is what you need to survive. A want is what makes life a little more comfortable and fun. Well, if you want to affect a change and not live in a growing system of technocratic feudalism, and that's really the term I think fits here, because you are becoming a serf, where you're moving in that direction, then you've got to take the economy into your own hands. And right now, you control it. You see, if they had the digital dollar in place and they had social credit and so forth, you'd be limited in what you could do because you might not eat because they just keep your money. It's what they do in China. And who do you think set up the Chinese social credit? Our corporations. They know how to do it, but they're not there yet. They're moving in this direction. I mean, stablecoin is one positive move in the direction. The big, beautiful bill, the Genius Act, all these things, they're moving in that direction. But it's not going to be wake up next Monday and you're in that system. No, you have time to affect changes right now. And what you need to be doing if you want to look at social change from a peaceful standpoint, and I'm referring back to now social change courses I took as an undergrad in sociology and seeing what had worked in history and putting the two ideas together, you need to start collapsing industries around the country by non-participation. As painful as this might be, don't watch or go to professional sports. They are a huge lobby, huge. I mean, until the public became so outraged, the NFL didn't pay taxes. They were a 501(c)(3) tax exempt foundation. I don't know how you justify that with the owners making billions, but the public became outraged and now they use tax loopholes. Okay, so don't support professional sports. Just turn it on. Listen, do you want to eat? You want to be a serf? Okay, well, these are things you need to think about sacrificing. That's a want. That's not a need. Okay, it's not a need that the you watch the Seattle Supersonics win the Super Bowl. How many even know one of their players? How many of them grew up in your neighborhood? Okay, they're appealing to tribal instincts where we root for teams. Okay, stop doing that. Next thing, and this is already happening to some degree, don't go to the movies. Family entertainment, board games, things like that. Do things within your family. Do what they did back in the 50s and 60s. You know, pro athletes in the 50s had to have other jobs and the professional sport was not their main job. Did you know that? We need to return to this notion. We're not going to support the entertainment industry at all, whether it be sports, movies, doesn't matter. Next thing, turn off the TV. Americans lived for about 180 years without modern technology. The TV becomes really mainstream in the 50s. So we're about 70 years into that experiment. You can turn it off. Oh my God, the networks will go broke. You still have fun. Yes, you can still go play golf. You can go to a local high school game. You can do a number of things to substitute, but you do not have to support the system. And then you look at buy clothes on sale. Don't listen to the latest fashion and don't buy the $175 tennis shoes. And what's going to happen to pricing? Fire sales. Fix up your old furniture. Eat in. Don't eat out, period. And then here's the big thing, and the banks will just freak when I say this. Have a debit card because some venues you may go to for whatever reason, they have to have a debit card, can't use cash. Okay. But cut up your credit cards. Now the banks really are paying attention. And they'll talk on the media now. Oh, if you get into this, you're anti-American. You're collapsing America. Okay, well, we're just getting started. There's a second tier to this independent political action, and that's when it gets desperate, stop delivering things. Now, I say that with hesitancy because I'm hoping it doesn't get that far. because now you're affecting the food supply. Now you're affecting, of course, Trump is affecting the food supply by restarting the war, but nonetheless, you're affecting the food supply. You're affecting availability maybe of medicines, and I hesitate to go down that road. But what would stop this country in its tracks is if truck drivers didn't drive and dock workers didn't unload, and this country would come to a screeching halt instantly. Instantly. What do you want? Well, now if we have this loose coalition of independent people that aren't tied to either political party, now you have some kind of decentralized leadership, and they say, this is how it's going to be. Now, listen carefully. This is what it has to be. No foreign government is ever allowed to invest in the United States in political campaigns, ever, ever. It's a felony to accept, and it's a felony with jail time for people who do it. Second, you need to have term limits. The longer a politician's in power, the more they're owned by various special interests. That's a proven fact. Campaign donations increase for the incumbents. Next thing, no corporate money. You have to have publicly funded campaigns that are 6 weeks long. Everybody gets equal share of qualifying candidates, and you relax the pressures of getting a new party getting started. Like in Arizona, I think you have to, I don't know what it is, 35,000 signatures of registered voters, and they give you a real short window to do it. So it basically eliminates third parties rising up. Okay, well, okay, let's play the same game. No campaign contributions from corporations, and individuals are limited to a $100 one-time campaign. And if you're caught, it's a 5-year prison sentence, mandatory sentencing. So you can't know a judge, bribe a judge, or whatever. You're going to prison. And we get the money out of the politics. Now your vote actually means something. And the campaigns are publicly funded equally. So a third party candidate gets the same amount of airtime required by law as a primary candidate would have in the past. And what can you do? Well, then all of a sudden now the voice of the people becomes the voice of the people. And if you think this is nuts, let me end on this note. There was a man one time named George Washington. You may have heard of him. George Washington, in his farewell address, said, never, never, never let political parties come into the American system. It'll be the den of corruption. On that note, I'll leave you to your thoughts. Start reaching out to people, because this is how you build a collective conscience. I love America. I love the Constitution. I want it to survive. And what we have right now is not a constitutional republic. It's a pretend republic that's a constitutional dead horse. And we are now an oligopoly, a technocratic form of feudalism. And we can undo that through the will of the people. And that's ultimately what we want to live in, is where the people are having more say, instead of having leaders lie to us every 2 to 4 years and then turn around doing what they want that doesn't benefit the country. Why should we ever allow a dual citizen to serve in Congress? Who are they loyal to? That needs to be outlawed too. Tell me what you think. I'm looking forward to your comments, open for ideas. But if we don't do something grassroots, pretty soon there ain't going to be any grass. I'm Dave Hodges. This is the Common Sense Show.